Welcome to your Catholic Drive Time,
keeping you informed and inspired.
We love God, we ought to be able to talk about Him.
Getting you started on your day.
With the latest in breaking news and information.
From the Vatican to the White House and everything in between.
It's serious, it's fun, it's your Catholic Drive Time.
Good morning, everyone. This is Brent Haynes in for Adrian Fonseca on Catholic Drive Time. I'm here with Rudy Carlos. Adrian Fonseca is still on vacation. If you've been listening, you know that. If not, you know that now. Good morning, Mr. Carlos.
Hey, good morning. It's so good to have you here, Brent. It's always a treat to have someone with your experience in the studio, and I'm looking forward to the conversations you brought in today.
Be careful, Rudy. I don't want you to have to start the morning by having to go to confession later. But let's begin with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us in safety to this new day. Preserve us with your almighty power, that we may not fall into sin nor be overcome by adversity. And in all that we do, direct us to the fulfilling of your will. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Rudy, do you have some headlines for us?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You want to jump right into the news now?
Let's just go into the news and get it over with, because then we'll have more pleasant things afterwards.
Sounds great. Well, good morning. You're listening to Catholic Drive Time, keeping you informed and inspired. And here are today's breaking news and stories. Timcast reports Social Security recipients could face $17,000 worth of cuts as fund nears insolvency. The Social Security Trust Fund will deplete its reserves by the year 2033 when today's 57-year-olds reach the normal retirement age, and today's youngest retirees turn 72. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget said in their latest report. There are several options to keep the program alive, all of which are politically challenging, including raising the retirement age or eliminating the Social Security tax cap. Ground News reports after 30% of students quit universities, UK to revert to strict pre-pandemic grading system. Students whose A-level results were assessed by their teachers during the pandemic were reportedly dropping out of university in record numbers, with nearly 30% of them quitting certain degree courses. During the pandemic, grades were inflated due to the assessment process, but this year's results are projected to be lower as universities aim to maintain accurate grading standards. And make sure to dig out your tinfoil hats for this one. This one comes from Fortune, and the headline goes, "Scientists recorded a Pink Floyd song from patients' brainwaves. The tech could eventually allow for communication without words." Dr. Robert Knight, a professor of psychology and neuroscience, and Ludovic Bellier, a postdoctoral researcher in human cognitive neuroscience, analyzed the electrical activity of 29 epileptic patients undergoing brain surgery at the Albany Medical Center in New York. The patients who had volunteered for the research had electrodes placed onto the surface of their brain. While receiving surgery, they hoped would cure intractable seizures. Now, Pink Floyd's 1979 single Another Brick in the Wall Part 1 played in the operating room, and using artificial intelligence, Bellier was able to reconstruct the song from the electrical activity in each patient's brain. And those were your breaking news and stories for now. Keep it dialed on Catholic Drive Time for more. Back to you, Brent.
The gospel for today comes from Matthew, right?
Matthew, yeah, chapter 18, verses 15 through 20.
Well, the gospel means good news, right, Rudy?
That's absolutely true, Brent. So let's talk about the gospel today. Now, the gospel, as I mentioned, comes from chapter 18, verses 15 through 20, and there's really a lot that we can take to heart today, especially what is said over the authority of Peter over the other apostles. Now, the power of binding and loosing conferred on St. Peter excelled that granted to the other apostles, inasmuch as to St. Peter, who was the head and pastor of the whole church, was granted jurisdiction over the other apostles. While these received no power over each other, much less over St. Peter, this is a wonderful starting point for the apologetics work with our conversations with our separated brethren on the authority of the papacy and the succession of holy orders. Also in the scripture, Brent, our blessed Lord tells us of the efficacy of public prayer over private prayer, and the efficacy of the former is attributed to the presence of Christ in those assemblies, whom God, for his Son's sake, will grant the petitions offered by them. Now, from a practical standpoint, because I'm a really practical guy, where two or three are gathered in the name of the Lord, the fervor of one may supply for the weakness of the other or the distractions of the other. But I can't go on, Brent, without mentioning the fact that we are to admonish our brothers and sisters, because fraternal correction is not only our duty only when our brother offends us, but likewise when he offends against his neighbor, and much more when he offends against God. So please correct a blasphemer today, dear listener. You'd be surprised how often this happens in modern conversations. Now, there's a lot to take away from the gospel today, but let us maybe just reflect and take one thing and thank God for the hierarchy of the church, and in particular, the papacy.
And when you look at the gospel this morning, Rudy, think about how peaceable, how reasonable, how civil it is resolving a disagreement or dispute with somebody, and compare that to what's going on in the United States right now, especially our political disputes. I'm not talking about the usual litigiousness and lawsuits. Those are inevitable. People are going to have honest, good faith disagreements and sometimes bad faith disagreements on the part of one person and end up in court. But when we look at the seriousness of what's going on in the country right now, people jump to the political equivalent of the nuclear weapon almost immediately. We saw that again earlier this week. And again, the gospel tells us a much better way. Go and talk to each other so that every fact may be established on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. It's a very reasonable, logical process. The Lord is always, God is the author of reason and logic and justice and fairness. And if somebody has done wrong, they have an opportunity to speak to these people. And it's not just one person's word against another. A lot different than what we see going on in the news today, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true, Brent. And here's another thing that I didn't mention here. In the gospel, it also talks about actually bringing this problem, or bringing this argument before the church. It also establishes the authority of the church to sort out certain things. The gospel talks about binding and loosing, and that's given to the priests as well. And so it's a wonderful example of a truly Christian culture to be able to sort out our disputes in light of the church.
Well, we put Jesus first, of course, Rudy, but we have a saint for today, don't we?
That's right. The saint today is Saint Stephan of Hungary. And today, Holy Mother, the Church commemorates Saint Stephan. He was the Hungarian monarch who led his country to embrace the Christian faith during the 11th century, which actually wasn't too far away from where we are now. Now, mothers, take note. Imagine yourself having a vision prophesying the life of your child. Duchess Serold, his mother, had such a vision in which the original Saint Stephan, who was the church's first martyr, appeared to her and said that she would bear a son who would evangelize their land. What an incredible vision to have. Now, his father, and we talk about his family here, his father had desired to convert the Hungarians to the Catholic faith. And it was a passion that was shared by the young saint once he reached adulthood and succeeded him in power. Now, after conclusively defeating an alliance of rival pagan nobility, he used their acquired wealth to build a monastery, and then he invited the clergy to come and convert the people. Stephan then established laws favoring Christianity over paganism and was recognized as a king by Pope Sylvester II, who sent him a crown and a gold pectoral cross. Now, well, he also gave him certain religious privileges, but just imagine how cool that would be to receive this papal regalia from such a pope. Incredible. Now, he showed great diligence as a king while devoting the rest of his time to his religious duties, including charity to the poor and sick, as well as to the worship of God and tending to his household as a good husband. Gisela, who was his wife, was the sister of a ruler later canonized as the Holy Roman Emperor, St. Henry II. So he was in proximity to many, many other holy people. So, Brent, pick your friends wisely. I don't know what you're doing with hanging out with me sometimes. You got to pick your friends wisely, or who knows, maybe there's hope for us yet, and we'll be saints together. But later in 1038, on the Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, Stephan delivered his final words to the leaders of the church and to the state. And he told them to protect and to spread the Catholic faith. To the Virgin Mary, the king directed one of his final prayers, saying, quote, "To thee, O Queen of Heaven, and to thy guardianship I commend the Holy Church, all of the bishops and the clergy and the whole kingdom, its rulers, its inhabitants, but before all I commend my soul to thy care," unquote. What a beautiful way to go. Now, St. Stephen's life, Brent, it reminds us to use our influence at every opportunity to bring about the kingdom of God and spreading our Catholic faith all over the world in direct opposition to the spirit of the world. So Saint Stephen of Hungary, pray for us.
And to this day, Hungary is a very largely Catholic country. More than 60% of the people, by some surveys there, are Catholic. And of course, during the Nazi and fascist persecution toward the end of World War II, and then the communist persecution afterwards, some of our Catholics out there might remember Cardinal Joseph Minzenci. I'm going to get the name wrong. Hungarian is a difficult language. But he was imprisoned under the Nazis, under the fascists, and then later he stood up very courageously to the communist authorities, and sometimes to the consternation of the Vatican, perhaps. But he ended up being imprisoned. He ended up later living in the United States Embassy as a guest for a while. He was free during the 1968 or 56 uprising, 1956 uprising. But he was a real champion, and he set a powerful witness, and you can see some of the effects of that to this day, where more than 6 in 10 Hungarians still will identify themselves as Catholics.
Yeah, and Hungary has these really wonderful propositions that they've put forth for bolstering the family. And, I have to, maybe we'll talk about this next week, but I have to take a look at what's going on here in Texas, because I think that there was a really awesome case that has been, I think it's been passed through the House, where it's a proposed law that would allow people who are families who have more than 8 children to get a personal tax break, which is an incredible thing. Now, Hungary is leading the world in doing that, because they're really encouraging people to have families, and they're looking at their birth rates, and they're saying, no, we got to correct this. Let's incentivize people to start families again. So Hungary's got a really interesting history, and really awesome to talk about this Saint Stephen of Hungary.
If you look at the gospel for today, for the optional memorial for Saint Stephen, it's the gospel with the talents, and I'm sure every Catholic has heard many homilies on that. That's always a hard one. One servant gets 5 talents, another only gets as little as 1 or 2, and then of course the master comes back at the end and sees that those who've been productive, sees who has been productive, and they get rewarded. And then the one servant says, "Well, I really feared you, so I buried it in the ground," and he says, calls him a faithless servant. So that's always a parable that sort of inspires me, and at the same time sort of frightens me, Rudy.
Now, is that gospel about gambling? Are we supposed to take our talents and gamble and just really double them, or is it just kind of like, I don't know, maybe we should use our talents wisely and use them for the benefit of the Lord and the people around us?
I haven't heard any homilies saying that gambling would be a wise and faithful use of the treasure with which we are entrusted. Well, we have a good show for everybody today, Rudy. In the second half hour, we're going to hear from Maya Noronha. She is an attorney with First Liberty Institute, which is headquartered up near Dallas, Texas. She's actually in the Washington, D.C. office. She's going to be telling us some good news about some legal cases they have been working on for religious liberty, our First Liberty, hence the name of their organization. They do a lot of good work. They're one of the groups out there that go out there and do work that is really unrecognized and unsung, but you'll hear the headlines every now and then. She's going to tell us about some of their work, so we'll have some good news. We'll have some good news from her afterwards. Then when we come back from the break in a few minutes, we'll talk about something that's a little more serious. We're going to talk about free speech, Rudy. And have you noticed any trends regarding free speech in the last few weeks or months or years since you started your job here at GRN?
Free speech? Well, I mean, they've let me continue talking, so I guess I must have free speech, right?
Well, you're able to talk. But we'll talk about some examples afterwards and some trends that are developing after we come back from the break. And the reason I bring it up, and I hope that our listeners will consider this, is there is no freedom of religion, Rudy, really, without free speech. So we're gonna look at that. In the next hour, of course, we're going to have our usual game show. Isn't that right?
That's right. Prizes are at stake, and dear listener, you could call ahead and make sure to go to grnonline.com/CDT, and the number is posted there. So if you want to hedge your bet early and call in for the game show today, we'd really appreciate that. And there's prizes at stake, but there's going to be a lot more conversations here on Catholic Drive Time, so stick with us. After this break, we're going to be talking again about free speech with Brent Haynes. Don't go away.
Hey, Donnie, what are the mysteries that we pray on the rosary?
Glorious, luminous, joyful,
And
sorrowful.
there you go. As parents, we're the primary educators of our Catholic faith to our children. And if you don't know your Catholic faith as well as you should, that's okay. Just tune in daily to the Guadalupe Radio Network by logging online to grnonline.com. The Guadalupe Radio Network. Listen, learn, love, and pass it on.
This is Dale Ahlquist with a Chesterton Minute. Have you ever heard someone say, "We should not blame people for whatever bad things they may sometimes do. We should not judge them for their faults. We should be kind and merciful"? Well, of course we should be kind and merciful. However, it is not merciful to say that we should not blame them for the sins they commit. As G.K. Chesterton says, blame is actually a compliment. It is a compliment because it is an appeal to a man's soul. When we call a man a coward, we are, in so doing, asking him how he can be a coward when he could be a hero. When we rebuke a man for being a sinner, we imply that he has the potential of being a saint. Want more than a minute? Visit our website, chesterton.org.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time. It's Wednesday, August 16th, the day after the Feast of the Assumption. Rudy, we were talking about free speech before the break. Did you see a survey that was done by Pew recently? You know, Pew is the big survey group. They did a survey of Americans on whether or not they would support, whether Americans would support, would support the federal government restricting false information online.
Wow. Okay. I'm interested to hear.
Now,
let's see. How much of a percentage are we talking about?
Now,
because I have an idea.
Go ahead.
I'm going to give you the number off the top of my head.
Go ahead.
68%.
Not too far off.
Really?
55% of Americans would support the federal government restricting false information online.
That is fascinating.
And, you know, Pew is a reputable group that goes out and does these surveys. They are the group that did the survey a few years ago that shows that approximately 2/3 of Catholics don't believe in the real presence.
Wow.
So Pew is full of all kinds of good news. But Rudy, notice the phrasing of the question. And look, I know as an attorney, how we phrase questions, how we present concepts is very important.
Yeah.
They didn't go to the American people and say, do you think the government ought to censor speech? That word censor would set off alarm bells with at least some people.
Uh-huh.
And even the use of the word speech might trigger thoughts of, you know, maybe a civics class somewhere where they think, wait a minute, don't we have an amendment, maybe the First Amendment that guarantees the right of free speech? No, these are different phrasing, which is what the advocates for these policies do. Would you support restricting false information online? Notice the phrasing of it. And 55% of Americans said yes. And they did this survey just at the beginning of June. So this is the contemporary state of thought in America today. And this is not a one-off, Rudy. This is up from 39% of Americans in 2018.
Wow. In just a span of just a few years here. I mean, 5 years.
And what happened between 2018 and this summer, June of 2023?
Nothing. What do you mean?
COVID.
Nothing at all.
Well, okay. I see you smiling. I see you smiling now.
That reminds me, Brent, have you heard of this new song by Oliver Anthony? I mean, I can't recommend it to, we can't really play it on the air because there's a little bit of crass language there, but you know, he does talk about that. He talks about this censorship of ideas that the government thinks that we're not privy to, but obviously there's 55% of the people here in the United States who identify as wanting the government to have some sort of say as to what we can or cannot say, what we can or cannot think. It's a fascinating thing that we're experiencing here. And so how does COVID fit into this?
Well, COVID, didn't it condition a lot of people to take instruction and direction from the government?
Well, Yeah.
And didn't it provide a justification for, and I don't want to go off on a COVID tangent, but didn't COVID provide in the minds of a lot of people a justification for the government to stop false information? So now there is a government agency, this was also in the news, a federal agency that wants to control what they call disinformation and misinformation. And the head of the agency has said that, cognitive information, in other words, basically thought control, is, the new frontier, in America. And that's the new the new frontier out there now. And so this is not new, and people think that maybe we're being a little too alarmist. Well, consider this. Newsweek did a poll among younger people, among millennials, for example, and you know what misgendering is, right?
Yeah. When you somebody identifies as a completely different gender, and maybe they look, the appearance might be that they look like a woman, and you say, hey, ma'am, or something like that, and they say, no, I'm actually a man. That would be an example of misgendering.
Well, if you saw somebody who was born a man and they claimed to be a woman, and you refused to address them as a woman, and you called them a man, for example, if you called them sir, or if you called them by their male name, that would be misgendering.
Yeah. Probably go to jail after that.
Well, that's where we're going. So Newsweek reported, and this is a quote, more millennials think referring to a transgender person by the wrong pronouns. Okay, now we're back to free speech. Simply referring to somebody by the wrong pronouns, the quote goes on, should be a criminal offense, then think it should be legal.
Huh.
Ages 25 to 34, 44% of Americans ages 25 to 34 believe that referring to someone by the wrong gender pronoun should be a criminal offense versus 31% who disagree. And then the remainder, don't have an opinion or don't know. And in that age group of 30, that's 25 to 34. In that age group of 35 to 44, 38% think it should be illegal. So we have large pluralities of young people under the age of 44 who think it should be a crime if you don't call someone by their preferred or self-identified pronouns and their own created identity.
Wow.
You're not even allowed to disagree with them, Rudy. You're not even allowed to disagree with them. Let's go through some more headlines here. I mean, this is not just a passing trend. These aren't random news stories. In the state of Minnesota, one of the government departments up there wanted to create a registry for, a listing, an identification of what they considered hate crimes. So one of the political parties up there, one that tends to be more pro-life, Rudy, and they're usually not in power in Minnesota. So they called it an Orwellian bias registry, and they managed to get some of the language changed so that now what they're going to do in Minnesota is they're not going to create a registry, so to speak, but they're going to analyze trends. Now, here's the point. Should the government perhaps analyze trends in society for certain policy issues? Sure. But who's making these decisions? Who decides what the trend is? Who decides what is hateful? Who decides what the bias is? We've already seen that a plurality of Americans, adults under the age of 44, think that it ought to be a crime to misgender people. Well, who do you think is making the decision of what to study and what kind of information to acquire and who to study when they create their records in that database in Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call, Brent. I'm wondering, what is your take? I mean, this country, we're not too far off from its origins, right? I mean, the country was founded with some pretty specific ideals, free speech being one of them. Do you think that we're at the end where, this is probably we're now irreversibly unable to have the articles that were established in the beginning of the country? Or are we just kind of experiencing some growing pains just because of the culture, and we're going to be able to just kind of go back and be a little bit more originalist in what we deem to be safe and what we deem to be okay in our culture in regards to these laws?
Well, how much time do we have left, Rudy?
You got about 4 minutes, Brent.
Just real briefly, Historians study this. A lot of people study the life cycle of nations. There's certainly the school of thought out there that countries have life cycles and nation states have life cycles just like human beings do.
Yeah.
Stages of birth, growth, maturity, and then gradual decline, and then an end or a transformation that sort of is the equivalent of an end in the case of a nation state.
As they say, empires come and go, and historians are left to piece together the pieces. So.
And when I was growing up, you'd hear a lot of comparisons between the United States of America and the rise and fall of the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Britain, might be a good example because they're, the so-called mother country from the 13, with the 13 colonies coming from there. We certainly face our challenges today when political actions such as impeaching a president become regular, when for the first time ever, a former president and current presidential candidate who's leading the nomination for one of the two major political parties gets indicted under, and I tell you as a lawyer, my own partisan views aside, under, on very questionable grounds, and we could do entire shows on that. You've reached a state where we're looking a lot more like less established, less well-run countries where people in power use governmental processes to go after their political opponents instead of, what did we do in the gospel today? We went and we reasoned. We're told to go reason with the people who've misbehaved. We're told to take two or three witnesses with us and to establish the facts through testimony. Impeachment is the nuclear option in politics. Mm-hmm. If impeachment's not the nuclear option, then criminal prosecution certainly is, and we have both of them, and it's hard to come back from that. So hopefully we'll recover. But if you break a piece of glass, Rudy, you might be able to glue it back together. It might look good from a distance, but it never has the same integrity that it had before. And if you look at it closely, you can usually see those cracks. And if you're not careful, it cracks that much more easily in the future. So in that sense, it's very difficult. But going back on this free speech issue, I mentioned before the break, I try to remind people when I give talks occasionally that you've got to pay attention, not just to the pro-life issue, you've got to pay attention not just to the freedom of religion issue, you've got to pay attention to freedom of speech. So you might remember what happened speaking of England, what happened in England recently with people who were praying outside abortion clinics.
Yeah, what's interesting is some of that's actually bleeding out over here. There was a recent case in New York that said that there was no way that we could accept bubble zones, what they call the safety zones for abortion centers, where you couldn't be a pro-life activist. You couldn't have displaying any sort of pictures of what happens in an abortion. But in England, it's completely free game. I mean, you're seeing people who are being arrested for just silently praying at the sidewalk.
So here are a couple of headlines recently, Rudy. From just March 7th earlier this year, UK woman arrested a second time for offense of, wait for it, silently praying outside abortion clinic. Silently praying, Rudy. That's her second arrest. She had just been cleared from charges from the first arrest. God bless her. She goes out, she prays again silently. Who is she going to offend? And they go and arrest her. Here's another one from just August 4th, less than 2 weeks ago. British Army vet sounds alarm after he's arrested for silent prayer outside abortion clinic. Unfathomable. And then it says this is the third case in which a UK citizen is being tried for silent prayer. And I've spoken about these incidents before. This is happening in the country that gave us the birth of individual civil rights. This is the country that gave us the Magna Carta. This is the country that gave us representative democracy in the modern era. There was democracy back in ancient Greece, but this is the country that gave us representative democracy in the modern era and created the idea of individual rights. Now, they do not have a written constitution in Britain, and they don't have a First Amendment. But we do, fortunately, and as long as we can hold on to reasonable judges on our courts, we can hold on to our rights, but we're always under attack. We're going to be under attack here, just like they're under attack there. So keep an eye on that Minnesota registry, Rudy. And we'll hear more in a different context after the break when we speak with Maya Noronha from First Liberty Institute, who will give us some good news. Now that we've discussed the distressing news.
The bleak outlook.
After the break, we're going to hear some good news, so stick around, everyone. And after the break, we're going to hear some good news on the religious liberty front.
Sounds great. We'll be right back on Catholic Drive Time. Don't go anywhere. More news after the break as well.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. In your view, was the Virgin Mary simply an obedient woman who willingly gave biological and maternal matter to Jesus and therefore has been given undue adoration? So here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, the Bible. The Virgin Mary is in the first book of the Bible, the last book of the Bible, all through the Gospels, and close to 15 other typologies throughout Scripture. Secondly, the Ark of the Covenant. It was the most revered object in the history of the children of Israel. That ark carried the presence of God. Well, goodness, the Virgin Mary did not just carry the presence of God, she carried God himself. Thirdly, something to think on. If God is a father, he is, and we are known as his children, we are, and the body of Christ are called brothers and sisters, they are, wouldn't God provide a mother for his church? He did. So here's an idea. Ask a wartime veteran who soldiers cry out for in a moment of fear. That's right, their mother. Mother Mary, pray for us.
I don't know why I turned on my radio, because I've kept my radio off for years. And once I turned it on, I was absolutely hooked. I love the shows with a Catholic apologist. I love the shows with the sort of day-to-day psychologist, Greg and Lisa Popchak. I love hearing not just of other people's problems who call in, but I love getting the Catholic take on how to deal with day-to-day reality.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time, keeping you informed and inspired. I'm Rudy Carlos, and here are more breaking news and headlines for you. This one is from Catholic Vote, and the headline is, Ohio Catholic churches are attacked after Issue 1 vote. Another example of people attacking churches in response to these political situations here. An Immaculate Conception parishioner who wished to remain anonymous said that she arrived for Sunday Mass and found horrific deeds done at her parish, saying, quote, 2 of our own stained glass windows were smashed, and a trail of blood throughout the church was left by the injured vandal. Bloodstains in the confessionals and overturned candle stands surrounded by melted wax, she said, was one of the many attacks in the Ohio Catholic churches. It's my suspicion that it was young people making a statement instead of handling it in an adult way, one priest said, adding that you would hope that they would be more mature instead of doing things like this, like calling a priest or maybe a teacher to talk about their problems with the church teachings. So more than one attacks there in Ohio. Keep them in your prayers. And the Washington Examiner reports Biden administration asks the Supreme Court to review Texas and Florida social media laws. Solicitor General Elizabeth Proligar filed an amicus brief arguing that the Supreme Court should consider the conservative technology group NetChoice's lawsuit against Texas and Florida. The 2 states, the brief argues, run afoul of the First Amendment with restrictions on how social media platforms regulate or moderate content. So this is in relation to Article 230, or Section 230 rather. While the laws in Texas and Florida differ in details, they have 3 things in common. They include content moderation provisions restricting platforms' choices about whether and how to prevent user-generated content to the public, individualized explanation provisions requiring platforms to explain how they displayed certain content to people, and moderation decisions to affected users, a general disclosure provisions requiring platforms to disclose information about their content moderation practices. Maybe they'll disclose how to actually make it on YouTube or Instagram or any of those places, but that's yet another free speech story there for you, Brent. But in any case, those are all of the headlines this morning. May God bless all of your holy efforts today.
It's talking about the free speech and how it plays into religious liberty. So let's say you're a football coach.
Okay.
And it's a big deal here in Texas, right? It's a big deal in most of the country. I'm glad football season is getting ready to start.
My neck's not thick enough for that.
Well, imagine you're a coach, and then after the game, you want to go out and you want to pray on the middle of the field. You should be fired for that. Is that right? Well, that's what happened, and somebody stood up for that man. And we have on the line now Maya Noronha from First Liberty Institute, and they stood up for Coach Kennedy, and they stand up for people in religious liberty cases, Catholic, Christians, all religious faithful. They stand up for people all over the United States. Maya, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Happy to be on with you.
Well, I got it right, didn't I? This was a football coach. He would coach his team. He was at Bremerton High School. At the end of a game, he would go out on the field. The game's over. He'd go out on the field. He'd take a knee, and then he would pray. And then tell us what happened.
Well, our client, Joe Kennedy, made a commitment to God to go to the 50-yard line and say a prayer and thanksgiving and, exercise his faith. But the problem was it was on a public football field. And so the individuals at the school said, oh, isn't this against the Constitution? So Joe Kennedy had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, but thankfully the court sided with him. And he has a right to pray on a football field, thankfully.
Well, and we see this all the time, don't we? I, as an attorney, am just amazed at the number of times we get educators, people who are supposed to be educated, and they will tell students, little grade school students who pass out cards in school that say, Jesus loves you. High school students who wear a T-shirt, for example, that has an unpopular message or especially a religious message. Let's say, for example, Jesus loves you. And the student will be told they can't pass out that card, or they'll be told to take off their T-shirt and turn it inside out. And First Liberty goes to bat for these people in courts all across the country, don't you all?
We do, and we're so blessed to have the opportunity to represent school children and teachers and administrators who are exercising those rights. We've had a case in Maine addressing parents' right to send their kid to a religious school. We've had cases where graduation speakers have a right to reference God when they thank God for graduating from high school. So that's a real blessing we have, that young people and teachers want to express their beliefs, and we can go to court and make sure they have that right.
Maya, this is Rudy Carlos. Thanks for joining us. A question for you on the fired coach. I'm just wondering, what was his experience like after the fact? I mean, imagine it would just be so disruptive to be fired from your job. Maybe he's been there for a long, long time. I'm not sure what the specific details are, but what is that process like? How long does it take to actually resolve a case like this?
Well, that case took years.
Wow.
And all Coach Kennedy wanted was his job back. And we're so thankful to those who support us, because there's no way he and his family could have afforded going all the way to the Supreme Court on a football coach's salary. But we've been able to do that and serve so many people, not at any cost to them, pro bono.
And Maya, Rudy is the newsman here, so he gets everybody off to a depressing start every day, because it seems like when we turn on the news, there's nothing but bad news out there. But there is good news, and there's good news coming from organizations like yours. Strangely enough, we don't hear a lot about it when we watch the mainstream media. But I was telling people at my parish, when I give a talk on religious liberty every year, I was telling my people at my parish about a United States postal worker who wanted to observe the Sabbath by not working on the Sabbath. He was a contract worker, if I recall correctly, and in Pennsylvania, and worked a rural route, I believe, went out and did deliveries, didn't want to work after they made changes. He actually moved to another route, correct me if I'm wrong, so that he could still continue to observe the Sabbath. And they said, no, you've got to go deliver packages for Amazon, I think was the big driver here. Isn't that right? But he went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and won a unanimous decision, a great victory for religious liberty, and that was your case, wasn't it? That was a First Liberty case, wasn't it?
Yes, we were happy to partner with a law firm as well as a Pennsylvania in-state family group. And we all supported Gerald Groff, who wanted simply to keep holy the Sabbath day. Our U.S. Postal Service, unfortunately, used to provide him an accommodation and work around that so he could take night shifts and not work on Sabbath. But they suddenly decided not to decline it. So we had to go to court so that he didn't have to choose between God or his job. and the Constitution protects him.
I've been following this case from Oregon for years. It's Sweet Cakes by Melissa. Is that right? Where essentially a bakery in Oregon was shut down because they did not want to do personalized baking, much like Jack Phillips in Colorado. They didn't want to do personalized baking for a couple, a gay couple. Tell us what happened at the U.S. Supreme Court and what your role was in that case.
Well, the Kleins are wonderful. They have a cupcake shop and are committed to God and marriage as defined by God in the Bible through the Holy Spirit. So they wanted to use their artistic right, free speech, to design that cupcake in accordance with their beliefs. But others wanted to deny them that right. And so we filed an amicus brief, it's called a friend of the court brief, at the U.S. Supreme Court, and they just rendered a decision about the right of a designer of websites to have the free speech to say what marriage is in accordance with their beliefs and not be coerced to violate them. So it's a wonderful decision, and we're waiting for the lower courts to apply that decision about website designers, which has implications for designing cakes too.
And in the Oregon case, the bakery was ordered to pay $135,000 in damages, and after the Supreme Court handed down its Colorado case, the Supreme Court vacated that $135,000 judgment, didn't they?
Yes, the Constitution says you cannot be punitive for the expression of religion when they allow others to design different cakes and different artistic, depictions of, marriage and other things in accordance with their beliefs. So you can't treat those who express religion differently than secular depictions. And you can't punish someone for expressing their beliefs.
All right. After the break, we're going to come back and talk with Maya Noronha of First Liberty some more about some other victories from First Liberty and the importance of religion in society and the importance of free speech for freedom of religion. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your one-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Your church most likely has a praise and worship time. Would you be surprised to know that the songs you sing might have nothing to do with worship? So here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, history. Praise and worship was not a term used until the mid-'60s when the Jesus People music started becoming more complex and contemporary. By the late 70s, praise and worship had become an entire entity of its own. Secondly, what is worship? It's a sacrifice. It's not singing a soft, flowy song with hands raised. The New Testament writers understood that worship was a sacrifice, that it occurred on an altar, which was and is known as a place of slaughter. Thirdly, the altar is for you. Jesus, in the holy sacrifices of the Mass, invites you to participate in His timeless sacrifice of love that truly occurs on the altar. No nightclub effects, no entertainment, no pumped-up emotion. Oh, and please don't register for the next Praise and Worship Global Seminar. Why? Because you can't teach praise and it won't include worship. Yikes.
Hey, Donnie, name 4 of the 7 sacraments.
Baptism, confession.
That's right, reconciliation.
Communion, and confirmation.
As parents, we're the primary educators of our Catholic faith to our children, and if you don't know your Catholic faith as well as you should, that's okay. Just tune in daily to the Guadalupe Radio Network by logging online to grnonline.com. The Guadalupe Radio Network. Listen, learn, love, and pass it on.
Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time on GRN Radio. I'm Brent Haynes, in for Adrian Fonseca. I'm here with Rudy Carlos, the newsman, and we are talking with Maya Noronha of First Liberty Institute. First Liberty defends religious liberty, our first liberty, all around the country. Maya's told us about some victories they've had at the Supreme Court for Coach Kennedy, the football coach who would take a knee and pray after a game, who was essentially persecuted for that. And they won that case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. They represented a postal worker and won a unanimous decision. That means even the liberals on the U.S. Supreme Court said that it was discrimination against this man's religious beliefs. when the Postal Service insisted they couldn't make an accommodation to let him have his day off on his Sabbath. Maya, what other cases is First Liberty working on right now? And even what other religious liberty cases are out there that you all might not be working on, but people who are interested in this First Liberty, this vital right of religious freedom, should be keeping an eye on?
Well, we have a case going on in Florida where, sadly, we know about so many houses of worship and pregnancy resource centers that are pro-life that were subject to tremendous violence. So we joined forces with the Florida Attorney General and representing Heartbeat of Miami, a wonderful pro-life ministry, to sue Jane's Revenge and seek remedies for the tremendous violence and, incurred financial struggle that these pro-life ministries do, and the, hate speech that's been inscribed on about religious beliefs, about abortion. So we're looking forward to receiving some remedies so, these pro-life pregnancy centers can protect themselves with security cameras and just focus on providing that loving care that they provide to mothers and their children.
Maya, that's so true. One of the news stories we covered today was actually in response to Article 1 over in Ohio, and some of the churches were attacked that way. But I find it interesting that you bring up Jane's Revenge, because oftentimes we hear about the attacks, but we don't actually hear about anybody getting arrested or being prosecuted or anything like that. But you're saying that there's actual, you're able to actually prosecute somebody from this organization. Is that the case? There's actually somebody at the top of this organization?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So the criminal side of it is being done by the Florida State criminal, prosecutors. But we're dealing with remedies in civil court. You can't block the entrance to a pro-life, family service that provides ultrasounds and wonderful health resources to women in need.
Maya, you and I were speaking before we went on the air about the importance of religion in society. If you were to believe the headlines and a lot of the popular, just information out there and the way people talk, you would think that religion is just a force for divisiveness and that more people have died in wars over religion than anything else. And that's just not true, is it?
No, it's not. We are so blessed by having those people of faith to serve people in need, from in schools, on the field, in sports, as well as in the military. We were blessed to work with the Archdiocese for Military Affairs to help the chaplains of Franciscans provide spiritual care to veterans who are injured at a military hospital, Walter Reed. So it's wonderful, the ministry that Franciscans and so many orders and people of faith as chaplains provide, and it's so helpful to their healing. That's something religion should be known to, and there's evidence to prove it. Is it good for our world?
And when you all win a case, even at the local level, that can often have a national effect. Isn't that right? Wasn't that the case in situation in your case with the Department of Veterans Affairs and abortion?
Yes. Our lovely client, Stephanie Carter, who's a nurse practitioner, objected to abortion when the federal government imposed a coercive mandate to say you had to provide abortion services on military, Veterans Affairs hospitals. So Stephanie Carter, courageously went with us to court and said, this is a violation of my religious freedom, my conscience rights to object. And the success she had through just filing a case in a Texas court had national implications, because the VA in response started an accommodations process for not just Stephanie, but for pro-lifer healthcare providers all across the country. So that's a national blessing that God has really brought forth from the courageous witness of one believer.
And that word accommodations, you and I as attorneys use that all the time, but that's an important legal concept. A regular American out there, by regular I mean somebody who doesn't have the disadvantage of having gone to law school, Maya, but an American out there who's working in a job, say they're a pharmacist, or they're a nurse, or they're a doctor, or they're a fire chief, something like that, and all of a sudden they're told, or they're a postal worker, they're told they have to do something that violates their religious beliefs. The employer should generally offer them, and the law often requires the employer to offer them a reasonable accommodation. And that was the situation with the postal worker, correct?
Yes.
The postal worker, the Postal Service could have said, okay, your day off can be your Sabbath. And the Postal Service refused to do that. And this idea of an accommodation in the law is the way a civil society reconciles differences so that we can literally accommodate different people with different beliefs. Is that a good way to put it?
Sure. The federal government is the largest employer in the nation. So with that many individuals with a diversity of beliefs, they definitely could accommodate and, work around so someone who doesn't have the religious objections could provide services to those who wanted them. That was the case with the U.S. Postal Service, a national provider of mail. That was the issue with Veterans Affairs. There are all these other individuals at the hospital. So you can't force someone who, is discerned to provide care and say, I'm forced to provide the surgery because Stephanie Cartier knows, as a healthcare provider, that God is the one providing the healing.
And you all, First Liberty, you all don't just represent Christians, you don't just represent Catholics, right? You represent people of all different religious faiths who are being essentially denied their rights by the government. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't, represent folks because they're Catholic. I represent them because I'm Catholic and believe that everyone has this basic right to freely exercise their most sincerely held beliefs. And we've represented sweat lodges of Native Americans. We've represented Jews, Buddhists, Falun Gong. And we all unite together because we believe there's a creator who's given all of us those rights. And I will stand for those who have those beliefs, no matter where they come from, because that's the freedom given us by God and recognized in our U.S. Constitution.
And if we don't stand up for those people whose religious beliefs might be different than ours, they'll come for us next. Isn't that right?
Yes, that was a statement by those after the Holocaust. You didn't stand up for Jewish, and you didn't stand up for other beliefs, and finally, you might find yourself in that. But we've been blessed with the opportunity, in so many cases, other folks in Gerald Groff's case, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, all said, we don't share, Gerald Groff's particular beliefs. But we know that it can affect our religious observances. So they supported Gerald, and every single one of the 9 Supreme Court justices supported Gerald. So we're thankful for that because people can work together and support each other in faith.
And we were talking about the intersection of free speech and religious freedom. Tell us about this fire chief in California who went to a conference, and tell us what happened after he went to what kind of conference he went to, and tell us what happened after he went to that conference.
Yeah, Ronald Hiddle is a fire chief, and he went to a conference and was able to do it. Was approved, and because the fire folks in management disagreed with the principals at that conference, which was a religious conference, they tried to take away Hiddle's job. That's just another incident of where freely expressing your beliefs, those are two freedoms, both in the Constitution. The first freedom is freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. So religious speech is protected in our Constitution, and that's connected so importantly with our freedom of religion.
And people might think that they're safe praying in their own home or having a Bible study meeting or having friends over. That's not always the case, is it? At least not in California.
No, we have cases where rabbis, want to express their beliefs, and the home is the most sacred place to do that. We've had cases where folks want to read their Bible, and folks, police officers enter in, or neighbors complain, this is too loud, this is, offending my beliefs. I'm an offended observer, but you still have a right. You don't sacrifice it at your home. You can't be pushed to be silent. You can speak out. This coming September, we're inviting everyone all across the country to take a knee with Coach Kennedy and pray with us. You can play and you can pray on the field.
Well, if someone out there finds that they're in a situation where they think their religious rights are being violated, how do they go about contacting First Liberty or some other organization to try to get some legal help?
Well, we have a website, firstliberty.org, where you can write in a request for legal help, and we'll review your circumstances and see if we have the resources to help you. So there are ways to seek that help. So don't lose hope if you find yourself in the situation of Stephanie or Gerald or others at military offices, or we've even represented the Knights of Columbus in wanting to allow nativity scenes. So you shouldn't be forced to keep within the four walls of a church or a convent. You have a right to come out into the public square, and that's a God-given right. I'll use my legal skills along with our team to protect that right, because it's given by God, and we'll just prevent the government from encroaching on it.
Maya Noronha with First Liberty Institute, thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for being with us this morning and keeping us informed. And listeners out there who are interested can check out the First Liberty website. And stay tuned. Come back in the next hour for more information and inspiration on Catholic Drive Time.
So many of us carry such heavy burdens.
She's having a relationship with George. It's disgusting.
Deep within, we struggle because sin separates us from God. But thanks to the grace of confession, God compassionately listens, forgives, and sets us free. So if it's been a while since you've been to confession or Mass, come home and experience a fresh start. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Who did God use to get John the Baptist filled with the Holy Spirit? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Here's your choices. Could it have been Simeon or St. Joseph or maybe an unknown prophet? Maybe Jesus? Who was it? Your answer in a moment. Secondly, so what methods do we see in the New Testament for Christians receiving the Holy Spirit? Well, it was usually through the laying on of hands. Peter and John laid hands on those in Samaria. St. Paul laid hands on those believers in Ephesus. Prior to that, we see Jesus merely breathing on the apostles. So here's your answer. A greeting. Yes, a greeting. You see, after Gabriel's powerful annunciation to the Virgin Mary, a simple, profound greeting from Mary to Elizabeth caused John the Baptist to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And as a result, he leaped in her womb. Now, to all my daring Pentecostal church friends, no matter how much you pray in tongues over someone, this method won't work. Why? Because it's not a method. It was the divine team of the Blessed Trinity, Gabriel, Mary, and Elizabeth, and that, my friend, will not happen again.
I actually was gone from the Catholic Church for 35 years. I want to get to heaven. I don't know if I will. I worry about it. But I not only want to get to heaven at the moment of my death, I want to find as much heaven as possible here on earth. So I need help. I don't know why I turned on my radio, because I've kept my radio off for years. And once I turned it on, I was absolutely hooked.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul. All Catholic, all the time. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time on the GRN Radio Network. This is Brent Haynes in for Adrian Fonseca. I'm here with Rudy, the newsman Carlos. Rudy, you're sitting over there smiling. You've got a big smile on your face considering that you have the job of breaking the news to people. It's got to be hard to find good news these days.
Well, yeah, it is a little hard. And to be honest, we do get a fair share of criticism sometimes. Callers will call in or email and say things like, why are you guys focusing on the bad news? Listen, the news is the news. I can't really do much about that. I'm just trying to inform the people of this great nation about what's going on and how it affects their life. So I hope people aren't taking too much of a bleak outlook as to what's going on there, considering the fact that Maya really gave us an interesting look at some wins for religious liberty and free speech.
It's important to realize that just like there are pro-lifers out there, unsung heroes who go out anonymously day after day, week after week, who go out to abortion facilities and pray, who go out to abortion facilities and hand out pamphlets and provide information so that women in need will know where they can go to get resources and support. It's important to realize that there are also professionals, paid and many, many volunteer pro bono lawyers who are out there donating their services and who are in the fight in the courts. And you're just not going to hear about their legal victories very often in the mainstream media. And when you do hear about it, it's often going to be very minimized.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, people out there in the medical profession and at other fields who are donating their time. I'm on the board of a pregnancy center in my community near where I work. And, we have a volunteer doctor who's going to be our medical director. If you have an ultrasound, you have to have somebody who reads those ultrasound results. They have to read those images. And
yeah, I got to tell you, Brent, I mean, going through it twice, I don't know what I'm looking at sometimes. They're doing the ultrasounds and you're like, well, what is that blob? Is that, oh, well, that's actually the bladder. I'm like, oh, okay, I thought that was the baby.
So despite all of the discouraging news out there, and it is serious, and people need to pay attention, and I do wish a lot of people would get more engaged so that we could push back and preserve our liberties, especially our religious freedom, and preserve a more decent moral society. Aside from the discouraging news out there really are people out there that day by day, quietly, are going out there and volunteering their time, or even doing it professionally, and are doing the right thing and doing things that really would be good news if you knew about it. And what's the motivation for this? Most of the time, well, it's like Maya said, it's religious beliefs. Religion is you and I know as Catholics, of course, religion is a force for good, but we live in a post-Christian society.
Yeah.
And it would be a lot better if people would actually at least come to a fair, honest understanding that even if they personally don't or have not yet come to a belief in God, that religion is a positive, not a negative for society.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me also, that oftentimes the real change that happens, it works its course over an entire lifetime. I mean, look at the saint of the day, Saint Stephan of Hungary, and it took a long time for his reign to actually affect change in Hungary. So oftentimes we want to have instantaneous results just because of how instantaneous things are with the news or entertainment and gratification and all that stuff. It just may not be as quickly as we think. One of the great things that I'm reminded of is the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I mean, it took upwards of 50 years for that to happen. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And in the meantime, we're probably thinking, there's nothing but bad news going on. But actually, there might be some good things being worked out. And we have our Lord to thank for those things.
Well, Rudy, you gave us the news an hour ago, and you're not going to give us the news again because you just don't have it in you, right?
I just don't. People think I like breaking hearts. No, I really don't. I don't enjoy that very much.
Well, I know a lot of people are paying attention to World Youth Day and a lot of the, shall we say, disappointments about that. But I'm glad that, I'm glad to see that there were faithful Catholics who were willing to travel all over the world.
Yeah.
Because they care. They weren't going to a rock concert. They traveled all over the world because of their faith in Jesus Christ and in the Catholic Church. And that's good news. And when I was at Mass last night, it was supposed to be a trilingual Mass. But I had to go to a different parish because of my work schedule.
What 3 languages, by the way? English, Spanish, and?
He said Filipino, so I presume he meant Tagalog or Tagalog. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But it really ended up being 2 languages for the most part. But I was struck by the diversity of the congregation. Mm-hmm. And not just the racial and ethnic diversity, but the economic diversity, the socioeconomic diversity. And it reminded me of a comment a woman made to me, coincidentally, on the day of my conversion experience 18 years ago.
Wow.
I happened to be at work, and I was speaking with her on the phone. She was Catholic, still is.
Uh-huh.
And she made a comment about how the Catholic Church is truly universal.
Mm.
And when you go into other churches, there really tends to be a socioeconomic stratification. A church will tend to be very middle class or very blue collar.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in from the Episcopal Church, which is very middle class and upper class. Then when I had my conversion experience, started going to Mass, even before I was received in the church, I started going to daily Mass, and not receiving communion, but going to daily Mass. I thought about what she said, and I was going to Mass in a very well-to-do, expensive, upscale area. That just happened to be where my employer was located. And I was struck by the fact that there were people in there like me wearing shirts and ties and coats. And then there would be a man who would come in who was wearing like an electrician's or a plumber's uniform.
Hmm.
And and of course he wasn't the only one. And this is daily Mass, so these are really committed believers. And that to me, that's inspiring. When I was at Mass last night and I looked around and I saw, the different people, and he mentions the trilingual aspect of the Mass. I find that inspiring. Religion is a unifying force. Belief in Jesus Christ is a unifying force. Jesus transcends all boundaries, all languages, all racial groups, all ethnicities, and you see that in the Catholic Church like nowhere else. And that's encouraging. And of course, that's not news. We sort of take that for granted, but it might be good to reflect on that sometimes when people have been listening to Rudy the Newsman and get a little discouraged.
That's beautiful, Brent. Thanks for sharing that. That is so true. I've had that experience just one time, really. Going to a daily Mass out in California, out in the San Fernando Valley with the Fraternity of St. Peter. And a lot of these parishes that are given to the fraternity are often like in the nuclear waste part of town. And you had all kinds of different people coming in, and I thought that was really a beautiful thing. People starting off the day, giving thanks to God and being there and just starting off the day right. A great morning offering, something that we want to provide for you, dear listener. But Brent, usually you come in as a guest, but today you're here as a host, and I think it's a great opportunity for me to ask you maybe to get a rundown of some of the breaking news and stories that are taking place in the world right now. One of them is this indictment, or several indictments that are levied against the former president Donald Trump. And it's a little bit of, I get a little whiplash kind of looking through all these stories because it is a breaking story, so it's developing. But I'm wondering what your analysis is on this situation. What can we expect from Donald Trump, who's running again for the office in 2024?
Well, I think we know what we can expect from Donald Trump. He's going to keep talking. He's going to keep talking loudly and proclaiming, his view. And everything with Donald Trump is always the biggest and the best.
Which
right?
is fascinating, right? Because you think that would be detrimental to a court case that you're in, right? I mean, that would be probably something you shouldn't talk about in public. But
well, in fact, that's a legal issue. You might have seen that the prosecutors in the D.C. case, Jack Smith, who we should talk about really, and the special prosecutor, they normally the prosecution is required by the Constitution and by the laws around the United States. Prosecutors are always required to turn over the evidence to the defendant. You don't get to hold anything back. And that goes all the way back to a case called Brady versus Maryland, where the prosecutors had information that suggested that the defendant might not be guilty, and they withheld that information. That is a gross ethical violation. The prosecution doesn't want to turn information over to President Trump because they're saying, well, he's going to go out and talk about it on the campaign trail and he's going to misuse the information. So now you have this conflict between President Trump's free speech rights as a political candidate and the government wanting to prosecute him. So that's a serious problem. That is a novel legal issue. And of course, that's why you have problems when you start prosecuting political candidates. Look, if it was clear that Trump had committed some regular crime, if there was what we call probable cause to believe that he had committed what everybody would recognize as is a crime, well, of course he should be prosecuted. But here's what he's really charged with. If you look at the most recent incident, the most recent indictment from Georgia, which just came down, it's free speech. And if you look at the indictments literally say he sent a tweet or he caused somebody to send a tweet. He asked for phone numbers for people in Pennsylvania, or he asked somebody to ask for phone numbers because he challenged the election results. Rudy, politicians who lose elections challenge the elections all the time. There is video after video in 2016, or 2017, actually, in January 2017, of one Democrat after another standing up in Congress challenging the electors from different states and asking the vice president, and who was the vice president in 2017 at the beginning? Joe Biden, and asking Joe Biden to not accept those electors, and Joe Biden ruled them out of order every single time. And what they want to do in Georgia is say, look, there was some sort of criminal conspiracy here. They have even indicted his lawyers. So you have a political candidate who's following the legal advice. Now, it might not have been good legal advice. It might have been sort of an unusual legal theory. But he's following the advice of his lawyers. He's challenging the election. He wants a recount. When he says something like, yep, find the votes, you've got to put that in the context of a larger conversation, which is what people do. You're a young man, but I remember very clearly, and a lot of our listeners will remember the 2000 presidential election and the hanging chads in Florida. And the Bush versus Gore went on for weeks.
Yeah, and I actually do remember that.
One side would win, and then the other side would go up on appeal, and it went back and forth and back and forth. None of those lawyers went to prison. None of those political candidates got charged with a crime. And we're in a very serious state in this country when a political candidate comes out and is exercising his free speech and is going through the process of saying, let's look and make sure we have a recount. When he says we only need 11,000 votes or find those 11,000 votes, that's in the context of a larger recount out of millions of people, and he's simply making the point, we only need 11,000 votes. We don't even have to do necessarily a full recount or a full canvass. So they've tried to criminalize what is really free speech. And look, this is uncharted territory. It is hard to tell what the courts will do. But whatever happens, it's not good for the country. It's not good for the foundational principles and structures that keep us together as a peaceful, orderly, law-abiding society that elects our political leaders and our governors. I don't mean just state governors, but the people who govern us, elects them peacefully. When we start going to court and prosecuting people because they question an election or they follow what might be an unusual legal theory, that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're right up against the break here in just a minute. But dear listener, it is your free speech right to call in to Catholic Drive Time and play the game show. And that number is 1-877-757-9424. I'm going to give it out one more time. If you want to play the game show today, 1-877-757-9424. And you can call in right now and be put on hold. You'll be the contestant this week, or actually for today, because this week we have prizes at stake here. And we would love to hear from you. while we play this game show. But that's coming up right after the break. Brent, it's been wonderful to have you here and fill in for Adrian. And I always love your legal takes on these sorts of things. It's been a fascinating conversation with Maya. But thank you again for your knowledge and your expertise on this subject that I think a lot of Americans don't really know much about. It just seems like, from as you're observing it seems really complicated. But you always have a way to boil it down to its nuts and bolts, and it's great to have you, Brent.
Well, thank you, Rudy.
All right, more Catholic Drive Time right after this short break.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Many committed Christians hold to this axiom: if it's in the Bible, I believe it, and that settles it. Well, here you go. 1 Timothy 2 states the following about women as related to church life: no braiding the hair, no gold jewelry, no pearls, just learn in silence and do not teach. Does your pastor comply with these biblical instructions? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, an unpleasant fact. Many self-proclaimed Bible-only churches, sadly, will pick and choose what parts of the Bible are implemented in the life of the church. Secondly, Catholic catechism. Be especially attentive to, quote, the content and unity of the whole Scripture. And thirdly, a tough comeback. In order to understand the sacred author's intention, we must take into account culture, audience, and the literary genre. So if your Bible-only church does not strictly obey those instructions, then tell me the reason why. Well, we know. You know, 80% of your church is handled by women. So with those instructions in force, many women will leave your church, maybe even the pastor's wife. Ouch.
I didn't take my faith seriously, which probably means I never really got it to begin with. No, I didn't want to give up sin. The reason we sin is because sin is fun. But it's self-love sin. But it's amazing with God's grace how easy trying to not sin it really is.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Welcome to another round of Fear and Trembling, the Catholic trivia game show that helps you work out your salvation by the seat of your pants. It's a 50-50 chance and prizes are involved. Avoid the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Call now to take your shot. 877-757-9424.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time. This is Brent Haynes in for Adrian Fonseca with Rudy the Newsman Carlos. Call in for the game show, 877-757-9424. Call in and match wits with Rudy. That's 877-757-9424. There are 3 questions. They're true or false. Rudy will give an answer, and the lucky caller will then decide whether or not to agree with Rudy. Rudy, what are those prizes at stake that we just heard announced?
Well, we've had a short week this week, and I didn't want to short out one of our wonderful sponsors who we appreciate very much. So the CDT team is going to be sponsoring the game show this week, and we're going to be passing out another replica of the Coffee Cup of Divine Providence. It's that one Coffee Cup of Divine Providence that we found next to the Dead Sea Scrolls so long ago. So this obviously is not one thing that we can give away. We made replicas of it. So whoever wins this week is going to receive a replica plus some other goodies that we're going to compile here for our dear listeners who we appreciate as well. Now, I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on this and take it with a major grain of salt, which, by the way, you should add that into your coffee if you drink coffee. Coffee actually tastes better with a little bit of a pinch of salt in there. But this is going to make your coffee taste 80% better, at least, okay? And as a certified snake oil salesman, I went to school for this. You can trust me, okay? But we love our sponsors. And if you're a Catholic artist or a craftsperson and you'd like to sponsor the game show, just get in contact with me, and we'd love to have you. You can send me an email at rudy@grnonline.com. That's rudy@grnonline.com. But it looks like we do have a caller, Brent.
Excellent. So who do we have online, Rudy?
Let's see. Good morning, dear listener. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi. Who are we speaking to?
Virginia.
Virginia, where are you calling from?
Lovely name, by the way.
Where are you calling?
I'm calling from Lytle, Texas.
Lytle. Huh. What's Lytle known for?
I don't know. I don't know what Lytle's known for.
I think
Virginia's from there, so that's the call to fame.
I think the answer there, Virginia, in that situation is your unofficial attorney, as Lytle is known for its peace and quiet.
Oh, that's true.
I'm here with my daughter, and it's a big, small town.
It's a
city on the Grow.
So are you from another city? You're just visiting Lytle?
Oh, no, we live in Lytle. We've been living here since 2007, but it's their little motto is a city on the Grow.
So you're one of the founders.
No, not by a long shot.
All right.
So,
how do you listen to GRN? Who's your local affiliate, or do you listen online?
KJMA, San Antonio.
San Antonio, let's go. That's awesome. So, Virginia, do you know how to play the game?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I just want to give you a full disclosure, because Brent's looking at me and he's giving me like a legal stare. I just want to say I'm on your side, okay? And you can quote me on that. All right.
Thank you very much.
Virginia, I've got to tell you, as your unofficial attorney, that Rudy has already described himself as a snake oil salesman. So
what? That's an honest trade. That is an honest trade, Brent. What's wrong with you?
Selling it is honest. It's the product I worry about. All right. So, Virginia, have you played the game before?
No, I have not. No, sir.
All right. Well, we're going to ask you 3 questions. We're going to ask Rudy 3 questions. Rudy is going to say whether it's true or false, or provide the answer. And then you will tell us whether or not Rudy has given us the correct answer. You ready to go?
Okay. Yes, sir.
All right. Question number 1. Which of the 10 commandments forbids idolatry?
Idolatry.
Idolatry.
Okay. Well, we were talking about the First Amendment, right? Which is completely not, it doesn't translate to the commandments, other than it's actually just the first commandment. That's they happen to be like the first in the word. That's the only thing they have in common. But it's the first commandment.
Virginia, Rudy says that the first commandment is the one that forbids idolatry. Thou shalt have no gods before me. Is Rudy telling the truth? Is he right?
Yes, he is.
That was quick. Well, you didn't hesitate at all, Virginia.
Virginia's a genius. She knows her commandments, which is why I'm going to ask, what is the 4th commandment? Just kidding. I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't know them.
I'm going to say, are you I was going to ask, are you asking me or are you asking Virginia? And of course, you say 4th to me. The first thing I think of is the 4th Amendment.
The 4th Amendment.
That's the first thing I'm thinking of. All right, Virginia. Let's see what Rudy says to the second question. Rudy, this is a true or false question. Is it true that saints can only be canonized in Rome?
Is it true? Well, absolutely it's true. Because as I've mentioned before in previous broadcasts, the actual canon is in Rome. So when they put the body in there and they canon them out, that is in Rome and it has to be done there. The person who passed away is deceased, they have to take them over to Rome for that to happen.
Not sure if you know what a canon really is there, Rudy, but I like your arguments about it being in Rome. Virginia, Rudy says that saints can only be canonized in Rome. So he is saying it is true that saints can only be canonized in Rome. What do you say?
I'm going to have to agree with Rudy on this. Although I'm not sure, but I will agree with Rudy on this.
Remember, he is a snake oil salesman, or at least he described himself like that.
That is true. And then, Rudy, I'm sorry. I believe it might be possible to be canonized in other areas other than Rome.
Well, Taylor, what's the answer? No, actually, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. You were right. You can be canonized outside of Rome. Virginia, you were correct. Taylor pushed the wrong button there, but you are right. You are right to question me today.
Rudy was resorting to his old tricks.
Okay.
All right, so you're 2 for 2. Let's see if you can go for the perfect score. See if you can make it 3 for 3. Rudy, the third question is, who held the cloaks of St. Stephen's attackers as he was being put to death?
Well, you don't want to get any blood on those cloaks, so you hand them off to somebody while you do the deed. Now, this is surprising to me. It turns out it was Saul who became Paul. He was there, and he witnessed the first martyr of the church. He held the cloaks as he was martyred. Incredible.
Virginia, Rudy says that when the deacon, St. Stephen, was being stoned and put to death by the mob, that it was Saul, who later became Paul, who held his cloaks. Is that true or false?
That's true.
Well, you didn't hesitate at all, Virginia.
Virginia, that's right.
Yes, sir.
You're in 3 for 3 into the Coffee Cup of Divine Providence to win this week's prize. It's been awesome talking to you. It's incredible, actually. I didn't know that before today. I didn't know that Saul was there to witness the blood of the martyrs for the very first time. That's incredible. Must have had some sort of conversion experience or some sort of play into his conversion experience. That'll witness that. Yeah.
That'll be part of a future Coffee Cup of Divine Providence quiz.
Yeah.
You can work that in there.
Well, that's awesome. Virginia, where are you off to today?
Actually, just sitting at the bus stop with my daughter at the moment. So waiting for the bus to get here. That's all.
What's your local parish there in Lytle?
It's St. Andrew in Lytle. Actually, there's a St. Andrew in Pleasanton, Texas, but we attend St. Andrew Catholic Church in Lytle.
So St. Andrew is popular over there.
It's my nephew's
Yeah.
name, St. Andrew.
Well, that's it's been great to have you on, Virginia. Please stay on the line, and we'll make sure to get your information just in case we draw you on Friday for the prize here on CDT. And we really enjoyed talking to you today. Get to where you're going safely, and God bless you and Mary keep you.
And to you all as well. Thank you so much.
Stay on the phone there. Wow, it's been an incredible conversation here, Brent. We're wrapping up our hour here, and we're about to go off the radio waves, and just after this, we're going to have the Holy Mass be broadcast. So you can stay tuned for that, or you can join us for the after show where we let our hair down, and Brent's going to loosen up his tie a little bit, and we're just going to talk about what you want to talk about, dear listener. So if you want to join us for the after show, go ahead and go to grnonline.com/CDT. You're going to see all of the different platforms that we stream to. And every morning we're streaming to YouTube, we're streaming to Odyssey, we're streaming to Rumble, Facebook, all of these different places. And we would love to hear from you. Just go into the comm box there and lay out a comment or a question. And all of that conversation is driven by you, dear listener. It's been wonderful here to have Brent fill in for Adrian as he's out on vacation. Please do keep him in your prayers and his family, that he has number one, a great time in Europe, and that it's a fruitful experience for him. I know he's doing a sort of a pilgrimage out there in Europe. So do keep him in your prayers. He's going to be back here next week where we're going to be broadcasting from the Dallas Fort Worth area. So if you are interested in meeting up with him, I'm sure he's going to say something on our email list. So go again to grnonline.com/CDT to sign up for that and get more updates as to when that is going to happen if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But this has been Catholic Drive Time. It has been wonderful to be here with you today, to start off the morning with you. May God bless all of your holy efforts today, and join us again for the after show where all of the conversation is driven by you, and we look forward to seeing you right there. Brian, any closing statements? You are a lawyer after all.
A closing statement. That's what we do, Rody. Look, the best closing statement is God bless everybody for listening and keep the faith.
Awesome. Great advice. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.
Oh, welcome to the after show. This is Catholic Drive Time. We can't get out of here in time to get to Mass this morning. For those people who are listening to the Mass online, God bless them. And for those of you on the after show, you've got the rest of the day to get to Mass. I see that people have already started making comments about Rudy's canons and distinguishing between canons and canonization. So that's that's Rudy the snake oil salesman trying to sell us on that, and he almost had Virginia fooled. We talked a little bit about President Trump and the indictments, and some people who follow some news outlets might have noticed this or heard about this, but one thing to consider is the record of one of the prosecutors in President Trump's prosecution in D.C. This special prosecutor, Jack Smith, formerly from the U.S. Department of Justice and now special prosecutor, has a record of political prosecutions that have failed. He went after Senator Menendez in New Jersey. That failed. He went after the senator in Alaska. That ended up failing. Most notorious of all, he went after the governor of Virginia, McDonnell. Spent 4 years doing it. Used a novel legal theory. Went after the governor. The governor ran up literally millions in legal fees. He claimed that the governor had committed corruption because he had spoken well about some businesses, or a business in Virginia had set up some meetings with the business and some other people, and claimed that that was some form of corruption. Of course, anybody that knows politicians, especially governors and executives, they're always talking well about the businesses in their states. They're always promoting businesses in their states. They're always promoting tourism. They're always trying to attract jobs. They're always trying to get businesses to move there. Jack Smith, the same man who's going after Trump, went after Governor McDonnell of Virginia, went after him for 4 years, got a conviction at the trial level. It went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, 8-0, ruled against Jack Smith in his novel legal theories. They exonerated the governor of Virginia. And it was 8-0 and unanimous because we were missing a member at that point. But even the liberal Democrats on the United States Supreme Court essentially said that Jack Smith was out of control.
Jack Smith sounds like a music artist.
The country would be much safer. The way McDonnell put it in one of his interviews is that he's intelligent, he's well-educated, but that he lacks judgment.
I'm coming in late to the conversation. Are you talking about Ronald McDonald?
We are talking about, see, you're bringing a more lighthearted approach to this, which might be appropriate. I was going back to your questions earlier about the Trump indictments.
Oh, okay.
Talking about the prosecutor in Washington, D.C., Jack Smith, who has a history of political prosecutions, and he keeps losing. I mean, he might win at the trial level, but then when you get to the serious judges who look at his novel theories, he's just out of bounds and he keeps losing. He went after Menendez, who was a Democrat, went after Menendez from New Jersey, a senator. Went after the senator from Alaska and ended up losing that case. And the liberal justice on the United States Supreme Court, Stephen Breyer, no friend of conservatives, no friend of Donald Trump, no friend of people who would support Donald Trump, decried the prosecutorial discretion, or rather lack of prosecutorial discretion, by Jack Smith. And when the Supreme Court rules 8-0 against you as an attorney, and especially as a prosecutor, you know you have done something wrong. And yet, this is the man that the Attorney General of the United States chose to be the special prosecutor for Donald Trump in the D.C. case.
I'm sorry. I guess maybe I'm not having enough coffee yet, but I'm not seeing the connection here. What does that mean for Trump? It means that...
it means we have a wild, out of control...
Is he unfairly yoked here? Is that what you're saying?
Jack Smith shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a courtroom. He shouldn't have a law license.
Just on principle, because he always loses.
Not because he loses. Because he loses because he brings cases he shouldn't bring. He brings the machinery of the governmental prosecution process against people, which will just crush most people. Now, if you're the governor of Virginia and you're well connected like Bob McDonnell, still might, to a large extent, ruin your life in many ways. Took 4 years of his life, ran up millions in legal fees, but you can probably go out and raise the money and find people to fight for you. 80-some attorneys general, states attorneys generals in the United States sided with McDonnell.
Mm-hmm.
A former Obama attorneys sided with McDonnell. Jack Smith went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court and lost 8-0, with the liberal Justice Stephen Breyer criticizing his prosecutorial discretion or lack of prosecutorial discretion, essentially, and the separation of powers and essentially the abuses of it. And lawyers and judges tend to write in very polite ways. You have to sort of get used to it. But all you need to know about Jack Smith is his history. Going after Menendez and losing. Going after, Ted Stevens was a senator in Alaska. Going after Senator Ted Stevens and losing. Going after the governor of Virginia and getting smacked down 8-0. He doesn't lose because he fought the good fight. He loses because he brought cases that shouldn't have been brought to begin with. He is an out-of-control prosecutor. He shouldn't be allowed anywhere near a courtroom, especially with a prosecutor's badge.
Wow.
And now, there are questions in the Florida case. They've got a pretty decent judge. And she's asking why there's a D.C. grand jury doing things in the Florida case, because the grand jury is supposed to operate in its jurisdiction. So D.C. grand jury should operate there. Florida grand jury should operate there.
Mm-hmm.
But I was tying that back in. I went into that commentary because you had asked earlier about Trump and what was going on with the indictments. And, don't even get started about the one in Georgia. You have these people who ran for office saying they were going to go against Trump, got tied into her political fundraising. And you probably heard that before the indictment was released, it was released.
Yeah.
They put it on the web.
The AP had a copy of it. Mm-hmm.
Here's the legal significance of that. It's not just that there was a clerical mistake. Grand jury proceedings are secret, and it is a felony to release information from a grand jury. So what happened? What happened? Are they investigating how that information got leaked? And then why did she wait 2.5 years to bring this indictment? Why did she wait 2.5 years? Why did Jack Smith and the others wait 2.5 years? And then in Georgia, the district attorney says she wants to go to trial in 6 months. There are 19 defendants in a racketeering case that she's alleging, and she says she wants to go to trial in 6 months. I mean, I can tell you in my experience, you don't get to trial in 6 months in a misdemeanor in this country.
Wow.
In many jurisdictions.
Really? Huh.
The courts are backed up. It takes time to get the evidence. And if you have a felony, if you have a complicated crime, you don't go to trial in 6 months. I mean, it is a joke for her to say. It is laughable for her to say that she wants to go to trial in 6 months. There are 19 defendants in that case.
Well, it certainly sounds like they're leveraging all of this, all of these law stories, all of these indictments and stuff to keep former President Trump, from running for office. And it's so on the nose. It's very difficult to get past that.
Well, and the important thing here is, remember, we're supposed to be a nation of laws, not a nation of men. We're supposed to be ruled by law, not men.
Mm-hmm.
It might be hard to stomach. It might be hard to get past the feelings, but it should not matter. And ultimately, for a well-ordered society, it does not matter who the defendant is. So you might dislike Trump. He does a lot of things that we can all dislike and we should dislike. He says things he shouldn't say. He does a lot of things that are objectionable. But we don't apply the law differently to him than we do to you or me.
Mm-hmm.
That makes us a country governed by men, not a country governed by laws.
That's so true, Brent. And Just want to give a quick shout out here to our Rumble viewers here. Gina Kaup. I'm butchering that name. She's there, as well as Josh Knoll. Good morning to you, Josh, and your family. Greetings to you and your family, and I hope your chickens are doing well. We also have NCJR, and I am Sci-Fi Mike, Science Fiction Michael. Good morning to you. Gina says that she's a homeschooling mom. And there's a lot of people that are homeschooling interstate. Plus, Bishop Coakley started a charter school with classical education with the support of the superintendent Walters. That is so cool. I think maybe she was referring to this big win for families here. We were discussing Hungary, so I think maybe she was chipping in on that. That's awesome that you're a homeschool mom. Let's see here. We have on YouTube, we have Alberto and White Wolf. White Wolf says he has no idea or he doesn't even know the first thing about natural or common law. You and me both, brother. Aetna is here, and good morning to you. Jay Koch is here as well. Who else do we have here? Skunky, good morning. And Eric Rodriguez. Also have Brooks Durham. Brooks, good morning to you. And Los Creole is here. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us here. Now, make sure to spam the chat. Tammy's here as well. Good morning to you, Tammy. Spam the chat now and give Brent Haynes, out of 10, give him his performance level as if we were in the Olympics. So raise up the scorecards here out of 10. I'm gonna a couple 10s already so far, Brent.
Well, I'm going to run out of $20 bills.
We also have Alan here in the studio. Alan, happy belated birthday, brother.
Thank you, and it's also 59 years since I was baptized today.
59?
No kidding.
Really? It's your baptismal anniversary?
My baptismal anniversary.
That's awesome.
And,
do you celebrate it?
I'm going to celebrate it today.
That's great, man.
I got to work, so that's one way of celebrating it. And prayers for Monsignor Henry Bazoo, the priest who baptized me at St. Patrick's Catholic Church, 724 Camp Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. He died 34 years ago yesterday. He was suiting up for Mass in the sacristy at St. Francis Xavier Parish in what we call Old Metairie, just across the border from Orleans Parish. We have parishes over there, not counties. That's why we live in Texas. We have counties. And the Lord called him home on the Feast of the Assumption as he's getting ready to celebrate Mass. So
good way to go, like St. Stephen.
When I woke up this morning, the only thing I could think of in baptism, I died with Christ. And I think I'm going to be thinking about that all day today, even at work. In baptism, I died with Christ. So pray for me.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely pray for you today.
Thank
That's a wonderful way to celebrate your birth into the church, is to remember the date that you were baptized, and I don't know, go out for cake or something. We usually do that at home, and then we
have a scotch.
We renew our baptismal promises. I think is more appropriate there, Alan.
Scotch and cake at the same time. There you go.
And the renewal of baptismal promises. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, when were you baptized?
I was, I realized only later as an adult that I wasn't baptized.
What?
Yeah, well, when you grow up in the South, it's not about being baptized, Rudy. It's about being saved.
Yeah.
It's about the altar call.
Yeah.
And then I realized, wait a minute, I've never been baptized.
So they baptized you, right? I mean, you're not saying...
So I was baptized in the Episcopal Church, but what I do remember is what I really observe, at least by acknowledging it and thinking about it, is of course the date on which I was received into the Holy Roman Catholic Church. So I thought about that carefully and chose the date, and also had to coordinate some with a friend of mine who was coming in from halfway across the country. God bless him, became a late vocation and now is a priest.
Jay Cook wants to know, before you were Episcopal, you were a snake handler, right?
I want to know how he knows my history because
it's on Wikipedia.
Yeah. I am from West Virginia, but
my dad's home state.
It's a beautiful state, but I'm from the big city, the metropolis of Charleston. Huh. But God bless those people and their faith. I mean, it's I don't like snakes at all, so
I hate snakes.
I couldn't be a snake handler anyway. But when I had my conversion experience, I wanted to check things out, and I did. For about 6 months before I was received. Got private instruction. I figured out very quickly that I did not have to go through RCIA. It was another matter to find a parish that would let me avoid RCIA because they just tend to funnel everybody into it, especially with the priest shortage. Mm-hmm. But mentioning anniversaries, like Alan's mentioning his anniversary, I started looking at the different feasts and dates and everything and coordinating my friend's travel schedule and arranging for things to come into the church, and had my conversion experience in July and was received into the church on the 4th Sunday of Advent. So I was in the church by the end of the year.
Wow. That's great. I think mine was March the 19th. March the 19th, which is the feast day of St. Joseph. So that was pretty easy to remember. Also, it's the day that I proposed to my wife, so that it's easy to remember there. Wow, we got a shot of you flinging your mic to the camera there, Brent. Why are you so mad, bro?
Yeah, I didn't fling it, but we've got to get some oil or WD-40 or something for the springs for this thing. But
I gotta tell you, man. I mean, we're in the end of the use of a lot of this equipment here, and it's going to be wonderful next week to have brand new stuff in here. And I can't wait for the viewers to check this stuff out because it's going to be a vast improvement to the stuff we have here. Thanks be to God. Aetna says, chill, Brent.
I want to go back to, was it White Wolf who said he didn't know anything about common law or natural law?
I think he was joking about natural law, but common law is a little complicated.
Common law is a little different, but of course that's the nature, no pun intended, of natural law is we all know something about it. St. Paul talks about it or hints about it in the New Testament. And of course, the philosophers write about it. So everybody knows, and ultimately that's why people don't really have an excuse for a lot of their bad behaviors because we know that deep down they know better.
Yeah. It turns out here on Rumble, NCJR, that's actually Nick Carbone. And Nick Carbone he's going to be here in the studio on Thursday. So I'm going to hype you guys up here to receive Nick. Nick is going to be filling in for Adrian on Thursday. So he'll be on the air if you guys have ever wondered about Nick Carbone. He's going to be here. Nick, let's see here. That was NCJR. He gives you a 9.5, Brent. That's amazing. And you know how people, if you give them a choice between 1 through 10, they always say 7 because they don't want to be rude. So
is that what they do?
Yeah. So pay attention to that next time. What do you think about the performance? Well, 7. Well, you push back a little bit on that because usually they're just trying to be nice here. Pretzel says 10. I was going to go 9, but I could use the $20. Sci-Fi Mike says, Nick, we have Carbone's Pizzeria here that's popular, but I think it's for the cup and char pepperoni. Dude. Okay. You know about the tier system, right, Brent?
Tier system?
Yeah, like S tier, A, B, C, D, E, F. Or, well, I think it's DF.
For
no
what?
E. Just to rate things.
That one I'm not familiar with.
Okay, so S tier is superior tier, right?
Okay.
And that's where I put the pepperoni that cups up like that, because it's just incredible. It is like the most amazing pepperoni that there is. What's your favorite kind of pepperoni?
You're talking about pepperoni or pepperoni pizza?
I'm talking about the pepperonis themselves, but on the pizza, it has to be on the pizza.
Well, over the years, I have decided that pizzas, because I eat a lot of pizza, I've decided that pizzas are excellent vegetable delivery vehicles. That's the way I justify.
So true, King.
That is the way I justify my pizza consumption. I lived in Chicago. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I've lived in Chicago. And, of course, Chicago is famous for its deep dish. I have a favorite New York pizza place in Houston, that I go to I wouldn't say I'm a connoisseur of different pizzas, but I might be able to pass for one.
All right, so people in the chat are really wanting you to sing John Denver. They want to hear you sing, what's that song? It's escaping my mind here. Take Me Home, Country Road.
Roads.
That's right. Yeah, so
I'll tell you, nobody.
I'll kick it over to you, Brent.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear me sing.
And
I'm glad you all had me on the radio show this morning. But this was before you came to GRN, Rudy. But I was talking with station management. You probably didn't know at one point they were thinking about doing a TV broadcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I said, hey, I could be your host. I'm a lawyer. I'm good at speaking. And they said, Brent, we hate to tell you this, but you've got a face for radio. and
then they heard your smooth as honey voice.
And then I said, well, but you've got a radio station then, so you can put me on the radio, right? And they said, sorry to tell you this, Brent, but you've got a voice for mime. A voice for mime. So.
Gunslinger says, sing it, Brent. I like hearing that song.
Hey, speaking of John Denver, that was the first ever concert I ever attended, April 1978, at the LSU Assembly Center.
He sings
Baton
that
Rouge.
song off on a jet plane, right?
Leaving on a jet.
Leaving on a jet plane?
I'm leaving on a jet plane.
You know what's crazy,
Don't
Alan?
know when I'll be back again. Oh, babe, I hate to go. That is a good
Wow,
song.
I see the tear in your eye as you're saying that. But Alan, you know what's crazy is my father-in-law, as he was passing away, that song was on the air. Isn't that crazy? Like, what a way to go.
I'm impressed by Alan's memory. Like, are you on Prevagen or one of those things they advertise on TV? That's probably a joint supplement.
I work, it probably is, but I work at Specs, and I tell people, I think musically and historically, I can tell you about, 12 Rolling Stones concerts I attended. But I can tell you this, speaking of John Denver, here's the debate. Was John Denver really country?
Where's he going with this?
Was John Denver really country? People are saying, is Taylor Swift really country?
I never thought of John Denver as country.
But it was recently, I was looking at my phone and all like that, and my friend from Ireland who lives in Spain, she was the lady that turned me on to country music 30 years ago. And said, that is the debate, one of the debates. Was John Denver really, was he country? I know one guy that took a lot of aim at him.
Alan.
Was Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Jr. took a lot of aim at him.
Sci-Fi Mike says that great song, and then he died flying his plane. He actually flew planes? Is that how he died?
He was flying an experimental type plane along the Big Sur in California.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was in October '97.
Like for the government?
No, he was. I think he had done a show, and he was flying back to see his young daughter. This was his.
They just gave him the opportunity to fly this crazy new plane.
Well, it was, but you see, there were rumors flying around that he committed suicide, that it was deliberate, that he crashed the plane and all like that.
Oh.
And what was believed was he was reaching. I read this. He was reaching either for a pillow, or he was trying to change something. It was with the fuel tank or whatever. He had to pull a lever or something like that behind you.
That's random.
Yeah, and it caused the plane to go into a nosedive. He didn't have time to negotiate it in there.
They put the fuel lever next to the nosedive lever?
No, it was in the back. And
Oops.
He probably he did that. But the rumor was that he had deliberately he'd taken his life. He had some issues. He was a recovering. I know ultimately he was a recovering alcoholic. He actually clipped some planes. It was either in Wyoming and Montana, and he was under the influence. He was under the influence of alcohol, and he had been battling it for a number of years, and he might have been trying to get stuff back together. But 70s, I was a fan of it. I was really a fan of his. But by the 80s, he was doing some. I'm sorry to say this. He was actually doing some very, very bizarre and crazy things, as a lot of some of these celebrities are. His music is great. I mean,
all right. Well, speaking of his music, Alan, the Gospel Today and Brent, the Gospel Today talked about where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I shall be among them. So I think it's only fitting that we all sing "Take Me Home, Country Roads" right now together. Brent, are you in? I know Alan's in. Look at him; he's ready to go.
Whoa.
I think Alan might have the voice for
I'll start us off.
Do it, Almost Heaven.
Almost
West
heaven.
Virginia. Blue Ridge Mountains. Shenandoah River.
Life is old here, older than the trees. Take it away, Brent. Younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads,
take me home to the place I belong.
California. Oh, sorry.
Now, what I noticed is I think Rudy's looking at his computer screen, so maybe he's reading the lyrics.
I
But
am reading them.
Alan,
I didn't know all the lyrics.
Alan,
I brought my phone out there.
no, Alan was just sort of looking up. Alan knows the lyrics by heart. He says he doesn't know them, but he was not.
Alan's a music aficionado.
Yeah, he knows the lyrics.
Yeah.
You think you know the lyrics to a song when you sing along to it because you've got that prompt, but as soon as you take away the song, then you realize, hey, wait a minute.
I thought we were doing karaoke. I don't know if it was frowned upon to look at the lyrics.
I'm not
okay.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't look at the lyrics. I'm saying I'm impressed that Alan not only remembers dates, you know, from long ago, but he remembers lyrics too. I'm impressed with the Prevagen or whatever it is he's taking.
Okay,
If it's music, Alan knows it.
Try this one. I was born August 10th, 1964. 2 days later, Ian Fleming died, the guy who gave us James Bond.
Now he's starting to frighten me.
The Vietnam War
reading
broke
one of
out
those
in
one time.
August of 1964. The Vietnam War broke out.
I'm sorry, but my mind is still blown that he was flying an experimental aircraft. Like, I'm thinking like a DARPA project.
Well, you know, those small aircraft.
Helicopter that doesn't make sound.
Those small
Area
aircraft.
51.
It was a weird shaped plane. It had like I think it had a propeller in the back of it or something like that. It was a ugly looking plane.
He was flying to Agartha. He was going to go see the UFO base in Antarctica. Like, oh man, there's so many conspiracy theories we could, kind of loop this in with.
It was an accident. It was an accident. He supposedly was getting his life back together. He was. It's unfortunate what happened. He was only in his early 50s. Yeah, just.
Wow, this is a weird looking plane.
Yes.
This is a really weird looking plane. What in the
I
world?
forgot what it looked like. I forgot what. Let me see.
By the way, John Denver, he looks like such an approachable guy. Like, hey man, like this is the kind of guy you run into and you're like, oh hey man, he's the guy. He's like, hey, how are you doing? And then he'll share like this incredible insight with you. And
he was born Henry John Dutchensdorf in Roswell, New Mexico. No
What?
joking. He was born in Roswell, New Mexico.
Are you serious?
And we know what is famous
So he's
about
a psyop.
Roswell.
So he's a psyop. I mean, this is just confirming.
His dad was in the Air Force. His dad was in the Air Force. And I remember watched an interview with him one time. He said he was in a school, I think it was in Alabama. His dad was transferred, I guess to an Air Force base out there. And
you can't make this up, man.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Roswell.
He was born in
experimental
Roswell.
aircraft.
He said that the teacher or the counselor was showing him around, and she looked at his name, Dutchensdorf. It was his real name. He said, "Are you from another country?" He said, "No, I'm from the United States." Just from looking at the name, thought that he was from another country. And I mean, just
that's wild.
Yeah. Obviously of German descent, and all like that. And he even lived in Fort Worth. He lived briefly in Fort Worth.
And we all know what happens in Fort Worth, right?
Just Fort
the
Worth.
Fort Worth lights.
Does Fort Worth ever cross your mind, George
UFO. This villainous laugh. Did you hear that, Brett? You hear that? Oh man. Unhinged.
I'm impressed. I mean, he's the music guy.
What are we getting for breakfast?
Food.
Let us know in the chat what you really think.
I had a priest ask me the other night when we were out to dinner, and asking to explain something about one of Jesus' parables, and he said, of course, I thought this was clever on my part. I probably shouldn't publicize this, but he said, well, remember, when did Jesus say that? Or when did he do that? You know, trying to put it in the context of his other activity. And I said, Jesus did that. Father, Jesus did that during his earthly ministry. That was the best I could come up with on short notice.
Okay, Mary, passive comment here, says, not that it matters because my comments often get overlooked. It's not because of that, Mary. It's just we ask you to repeat them and you don't. But she says, Robert Gouveia, Esquire, regarding the Arizona criminal law, and Jay Sekulow, former or founder of the ACLJ. See, this is, I don't know what the point of the comment is. I'm sorry, Mary, but...
And I don't see it. I don't have that one up. I'm looking at a different one. Jay Sekulow does a lot of good work, though.
Anyway, Jay Cook says breakfast scotch for breakfast. So, what kind of scotch are we having?
I'm an American. If I'm going to drink, I'm going to drink an American liquor.
We're going to have some bourbon.
That's right.
We'll have some bourbon. What's Virginia known for, alcohol-wise? You got 10 seconds.
I don't know. I'm not from Virginia.
Moonshine.
I'm from West Virginia.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.